Where are you right now?
I'm in Toronto. Yeah.
Okay. So is Toronto home now for you?
Well, I'm kind of between Toronto and Calgary, but yeah, I have a place here, but I mean, I think I'm always like a Western girl.
So when people say, where are you from? Do you still answer Saskatchewan?
Yeah, I still say I'm from Shaunavon. Yeah.
Why didn't you put doctor on your book?
I don't know. It's like lame. I don't know. I don't know.
Did they offer it?
I'm a doctor yet. I don't know. I'm a new doctor. I didn't feel right. No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to get into the official questions I wrote down that I was literally taking notes as I went through the book. Okay. First off, I know you wrote this during the pandemic, but you are a doctor.
Yes.
How did you find time to write a book in a pandemic as a doctor?
So I started this book actually a little bit earlier than the pandemic. Sort of sheepishly started it. I wasn't sure that I had anything to say, and then when the pandemic hit, I realized, oh, okay, maybe I do have like some things that would be relevant for people, some lessons and such to talk about. So I actually wrote the book while commuting through Toronto in the pandemic, mostly on my phone. I talked into my phone and then converted it into words after. So that's how I was able to do it. There's a lot of time spent in traffic here, so it wasn't too difficult.
That actually explains why it sounds like your voice. Like a lot of times when you read a book by someone that you've heard speak often, doesn't necessarily sound like them, but your book is very much written in your voice.
Yeah, that was one thing I did want to hold true. I worked with Nancy McDonald as a ghostwriter to write the book, but she literally would, I think, take my word files word for word and just try to make it sound like somewhat intelligent what I was saying or spewing out onto the pages. So you do get, I think, a flair if you know me at all, kind of for how I talk and the odd F-bomb dropped in there and things like that. But yes, it is my voice.
Okay, so when did you officially become Dr. Wickenheiser?
In May. Yeah.
So take me back to that moment, because you wrote in the book that it was like the definition of grit is med school and that it was the hardest thing you've ever done. So take me to that moment of achievement.
Oh, I actually remember my very last day on my rotations. I was in a surgical rotation in Calgary at the Foothills Hospital. Busy, but not crazy because of the pandemic. A lot of things were shut down, but the service that I was on was very busy. Long days, early mornings, schlepping, a lot of scut work. And it was my very last day and I knew I was done. And I left like 20 minutes before I was supposed to, which is a big faux pas that med students usually stay, or can I stay later? And I just was so done. And I walked out and I thought, oh my goodness, like from this point forward, now somebody's going to be expecting you to know something. And, here we go. So I remember walking out of the hospital that day, just looking back on 3 years, 11 months, a year that med school goes and just feeling like, wow, did it go by really fast? And what a time to be going through medicine in a pandemic.
Okay, you talk a lot about that loss in Nagano, about like almost like an identity crisis that you went through. If you weren't this gold medalist and this top athlete, who were you? Who's Hayley Wickenheiser now?
Well, I think I'm a lot wiser than I was in 98. I have a lot more perspective. I was a lot more defined by who I was as a hockey player. I see myself as, I once played hockey. I now know a little bit about medicine. I feel like my life has really expanded outward from just being an athlete to, I talk about, we're so much more than what we do in the book. And I feel like I've done a lot more than just sport as my career has gone on. And so I kind of look at myself as someone who is constantly still evolving and learning. I've got a long ways to go in medicine, but I've been able to create a lot of options for myself moving forward. And mostly I just enjoy now working with people. I realize that that's probably what I love the best about medicine, and same with my role with the Leafs, is you just get a chance to impact people's lives every day.
Even though you're an introvert.
I am a bit more, I am more introverted, more extroverted because I have to be when I do things like this. But definitely, I was saying to someone the other day, believe it or not, I was this shy kid that grew up in Shaunavon, Saskatchewan. Anyone that knows me would know that. But life sometimes forces you to get put in different roles that you wouldn't naturally evolve to. And I guess my life in a bit of the public eye has resulted in that.
It's funny you mentioned Shaunavon, and through the book, I didn't realize you were as connected to the Hunter brothers as you actually are. Do you stay in touch with them?
Yes, I do. I text with those guys quite a bit. JJ and I are just a year apart. He's 1 year younger than me. He's the old man of the family. And but I used to go on these epic bike trips every summer with Jungle Jim and all the boys. We'd ride from Calgary to Nelson, BC on our bikes on this 2.5 day epic journey, which built a lot of grit and resilience into my life. And they're like brothers to me. I keep tabs on them. We talk to each other every once in a while. And when the pandemic hit, we shared some stories too. So I'm really happy for the success they've had. It's been awesome to see.
Okay, I'm going to keep going through my list. You write a lot about medical school, obviously. You were in medical school as you were writing the book. Tell me about finding out you were accepted, because I think it is common for people to apply for things and to be rejected and to just be like, well, I guess it's not for me. So tell me about that process and finding out you were accepted.
Yeah, I didn't get in my first time I applied to medical school, and got in on try number two. And then I ended up having to defer for a year. I still was finishing my career. So, I wasn't devastated the first time. I knew that it could take a couple of times. And now being through medical school, what you end up seeing is everybody has a great resume. Everybody's smart. It's a little bit of a crapshoot who gets in and who doesn't get in. There's lots of people that I've seen that get in that maybe shouldn't have gotten in, and vice versa. So I was just grateful. I was really relieved. And it was like, okay, well, this is where my life's path I thought was going to take me as a 10-year-old girl growing up in Shaunavon. And here I am.
Has working through the pandemic changed how you view the medical field or what you thought being a physician would be?
Yes, it has, because we've had to convert to virtual care. I never thought, out of my day, I might be seeing half of my patients via Zoom or on a telephone. It's also reinforced how much human connection matters, that I think we can never quite completely take away in medicine. But there is a balance of both that can exist. I think we can improve the way we deliver healthcare, cut down a lot of costs through virtual care. But there are some things that you just need a human hand and eyes and soul to see, to understand in a patient, which has been tough at times. What I've seen is I know that we harp on the unvaccinated, but I have seen more good than bad in this pandemic. I have seen people do amazing things for each other, to another human being, to keep them alive. I've seen families rally, and that's kind of what I have to remind myself to focus on when, I hear walking into a hospital, someone's yelling at me that I'm a sheep because I'm delivering a vaccine or something. Those people are few and far between. And it's just, what are we at? I don't know, 75% of the entire nation right now that's vaccinated. That's pretty darn good. So keep going, everybody.
You wrote about the burnout you saw in December of 2020. We are well beyond December of 2020. How are you and your colleagues doing now?
I would say, I'm new. I'm like the baby in medicine. So I can't really speak about burnout, but in terms of being a physician, I see people that have been doing this for 30 years or more, and they're the ones that can really say if they're burnt out. But I think we're all a little bit fatigued, and what you get tired of is you get tired of people that don't respect the rules and the protocols that are in place. And so some days I find it difficult to have empathy, especially for those that have chosen to not get vaccinated and then do test positive for COVID. It doesn't diminish any care that we would ever give, but I feel at this point in time in the pandemic, much different than I did at the start when we didn't have a choice, and bad things happen to a lot of folks. So it's been frustrating. I live in Alberta as well, and to see what's gone on in Alberta has been, and Saskatchewan has been really hard. And my own family and friends that also are making these choices that are not logical to me, but maybe to them. And it's hard to rationalize when you know the science and you understand why we're doing this, why people would make these choices.
Have you had family members or close friends in Saskatchewan come to you and say, hey, is this legit?
Yeah, lots. I've had lots. I've had teammates. I've had pregnant teammates say, should I get the vaccine? Very legitimate question. I've had a good family friend pass away that chose not to get vaccinated, then got COVID and didn't believe in COVID and passed away. I have close family members that are choosing not to get vaccinated. It doesn't matter what any of us say or do. So I think everyone has these stories, and it's very difficult to watch. I often say to people, you should just walk around the hospital with me for a day and you would walk out a completely different perspective. But it's like anything, until you've lived through it, until you really understand, it's hard to wrap your head around. But I can tell people, it definitely is worth getting vaccinated. You could save your own life or someone else's. This is for real.
You've been to the Olympics just a few times, and you wrote about all of those, but you also wrote about taking on the IOC, even though you're on a board connected to the IOC ahead of those 2020 games. Did you have any idea? Like, I know that you crafted a plan, but did you have any idea the influence you actually would have and how that would go down and inevitably postpone those games?
Well, I did have an idea that my words would be received quite, they would resonate, because not many people stand up and criticize the IOC as an IOC member, which I am. And I just couldn't rationalize how the IOC thought they could host the Olympics during the first wave of a pandemic that was happening around the world, when all the evidence told us, and now we know from hindsight, that was impossible. And so it wasn't really making sense to me. And I really I had a hard time coming to grips with the athlete mind. The athletes want to compete, but then the medical mind knowing that that's just not a good idea. So I didn't take much. I've never really been a follower in the IOC. I've always sort of tried to question whether it's the Russian doping scandal or other things that they do. My job in the IOC is to advocate for the athletes of the world, and it's not really about the free trips and the fancy dinners. So I don't really care if I go to another meeting or not, to be honest. But I think in the end the world listened, and there was many more people other than me. They were just maybe slower or afraid to speak up. And once I said it, it's like anything; it kind of opened the door, and the rest of the people responded.
Do you think having it a year later, even though we're still very much in the thick of it, was smart, or could it have gone away? Like, I don't know what the right answer is there, but what do you think of it going ahead a year later?
Well, I think a year later, and at the time it was held, was certainly better than the start of the pandemic. We knew a lot more about COVID. I can't say whether I wasn't in Tokyo, I chose not to go, but I think, we see that the games were held relatively well. I wonder about the impact on the nation and sort of the debt burden and, what people were going through in Japan. But it seemed like it went reasonably well in Tokyo. They're going to have it again in Beijing in February. I think we should expect more of the same, where we'll have no spectators. We'll have very much lockdown, and the Chinese can pull that off, I have no doubt. So it's just kind of I call it the no fun games from a spectator and an athlete perspective of playing in front of thousands of people. There's not that atmosphere, but if it can be pulled off in a bubble, we've seen that in other pro sports that can be done. I suppose, this is the best that we have to do right now.
I know the discrepancy between male and female sport, but it was shocking to me, the finance side of thing, how open you were about it. Like, you are a worldwide name at this point, and you came out of your career with essentially no more money than any of us that just work a regular job for a living, but have this platform. And then, taking on that job with the Leafs while you're going to medical school. How do we move the needle for girls coming up so that this isn't a thing? Soon.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Well, yeah, I think, people will be probably not surprised to read that, you don't get rich playing women's hockey, and certainly not doing it for 23 years, so from the age of 15 like I did. So I had to be pretty industrious and learn how to manage my money that I did have at a young age. But there is a lot more zeros behind a male hockey player's paycheck than a female. Hopefully one day we'll have professional women's hockey to pay the players what they deserve. But until then, it is what it is. I wouldn't change my experiences, the opportunities that I had for any kind of money. I think when you do run into women's hockey players, what you realize is they're all pretty darn educated and pretty smart, because you have to be, because you're constantly preparing for a life after hockey. And that's in some ways maybe a gift that it's given. But we have a long way to go in terms of pay equity. I think tennis is the closest sport, maybe golf, quite a close second. The rest of the pro sports aren't even close. And until more media, it's a chicken and egg. Until you get more coverage and more media, you're not going to get more sponsors and more dollars going into the sport. So frustrating battle, but we have to continue to keep fighting it, I guess, to get pay equity.
Your chapter about Noah might be the most personal one. Were you at all apprehensive about opening up about his story and adoption and everything else?
I was a little bit, because he's 21 and, he's a man child now. And I just wanted him to feel, I mean, no one knows he's adopted and he's been with me since he was born, but he's a very open guy. I just really wanted to make sure before the rest of the world read it that he was okay with everyone else knowing his story. And he was actually, is no problem with it. And so, if it helps other people that may have gone through what I've gone through, or, are raising kids that from a young age, I was 21 when Noah was born. And, that's kind of why I put it in there. And plus he's the thing that I'm most proud of in my career. And he's taught me a lot too. He should probably write a book about what it was like to live with me growing up.
What did he think about what you wrote? Did he have any changes or anything that was like, take that out, or, oh my God, you need to talk about this?
No, he didn't actually. We made sure that he got sort of interviewed and had a chance to talk in the book and say his 2 cents. I gave him a copy of the book. I can almost guarantee you that he never read it. He hasn't read it. He doesn't really care. He was good with everything. I kind of told him what we were saying and what gave him his pages, so he's fine.
Was it important to you to include little bits and pieces of your family? Because you are, as much as we know about you, you're very private. Like, there were things reading through this, I was like, oh, I didn't know that. And I mean, being from Saskatchewan, it's like, I have to know these. It comes in Saskatchewan in the media. I have to know these things. But I learned a lot about you in this, and you kind of just sprinkled it through. I noticed that it wasn't like Noah's dad is this person and this is this, and your relationship with Wally and all of that. You kind of just sprinkled it through. Was it important to get all those important people in there for you?
Yeah, I did want to highlight the people that were really important in my life and my career. I mean, the book is it's not an autobiography. It's not the story of Hayley's life at all. It's more of a lessons learned type of a book. So I wanted to keep it along those themes and sort of label it along 3 periods of hockey: the defensive, the neutral zone, and the offensive zone. But then along the way, I mean, I think it becomes more interesting when you talk about the people that have impacted you and some of the tough times that you've had along the way. And so certainly there's a lot of people that helped me and impacted my life. Wally Kozak, Wadena, Saskatchewan being one of them. So I did want to make sure that I mentioned those that had significant impact, because you never do it alone.
You ended the book with a note to your nieces. What advice do you have for young girls? Things have changed a lot for women, even just in the last 5 years, I would say. But what advice do you have for young girls, potential or not, who are kind of watching how things are just playing out in the world right now?
Wow, that's a good question. I think the advice that I have is for young girls, young boys, is no one has to live in a box. Society has a box for all of us. If you're a little girl, you should do this. A little boy, I think the box is going to be smashed open, and you can make of your life whatever you really dream to make of. And I am a living example of that. No one ever said a woman would have a pretty high management role in the NHL, and here I am. And women were never supposed to be doctors at one time, and there's thousands of female doctors out there now, and it's a normal thing. People don't think twice about having a female doctor. So there's all of those things. So for little girls, like, really, whatever you think you can do, you can do. But I think the other theme is you got to work really hard. It doesn't just come, and you've got to put in your time and sort of have that resiliency and the grit along the way and go through a lot of tough times, most likely, to get to that destination. So it was a little bit of my story, and, dream big, and hopefully you'll be surrounded by people that will inspire you to live those dreams like I was. I was very, very lucky that way.